Welcome to Buffalo Pregame, your source for live Buffalo football discussion, news, analysis, opinions, and more. Presented by ASM Publications and Bills Digest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Buffalo Pregame. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, here for Bills Digest and ASM Publications. On today's show, we'll recap the Bills-Bears joint practice, several reports coming out from Chicago, and a lot of excitement surrounding this practice, a few dominant efforts from Bills players, and some things to be somewhat concerned about as well. Each week on Buffalo Pregame, I'll provide updates on the NFL, NHL, and more via daily articles, podcasts, videos, and more. Please subscribe to Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, along with Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on Substack, both of which are free of charge. All right, let's get into it. And the first bit of news coming from the Bills-Bears joint practice, Keon Coleman really dominating, and every reporter I've seen so far has just been raving about his performance today in Chicago during that joint practice, and we've seen it all summer long from Keon Coleman throughout training camp against Bills defenders, but now to see it against Bears defenders, another team, just takes the excitement and the hype surrounding Keon Coleman to a whole new level. What's up, Evan? Thanks for joining. X has been a glorious place lately, so nice to see you chiming in from X. Keon Coleman, 2 touchdowns today, one of which he reportedly spun a defensive back around before coming up with a big gain and the scoring grab. Josh Reed of Channel 4, quote, twisted the DB like a pretzel, got behind the defense and hauled in a 30-ish yard touchdown from Josh Allen. And like I said, Keon Coleman has shown everything throughout training camp. He's shown increased ability to separate, increased speed, increased quickness, and of course, that ability to go up and get 50-50 balls. So like I said, for Coleman to carry over that training camp performance into a joint practice against the Bears, which Sean McDermott termed a joint practice the closest thing you can get to replicating a game situation. So doing so against an opponent, just very, very impressive stuff from Keon Coleman, continuing to flood out of the Bills media sphere. And it's something the Bills desperately need. They need a bona fide number one receiver, a matchup problem, somebody who can go down the field, draw those defenders, and help other pass catchers get open. And it seems like, per, I believe it was Steve Palazzolo of Pro Football Reference, or it may have been somebody else. I apologize. I've retweeted him a couple times today, so he's one that sticks out. It's something that was apparent during today's practice. Coleman running downfield, drawing those extra defenders, and having others come open underneath him. So it's not only about his individual production, but the production as a group when Coleman is at his best within this offense. And it seems like you saw that today based on all the reports coming out of Chicago. So I'm not so sure he's quite yet ready to graduate to true bona fide number one receiver status, but it certainly seems like Keon Coleman is on a fantastic trajectory during this preseason and training camp. Josh Allen, maybe not his best day today, but I think you have to take his performance into account. He did have a couple of touchdowns to Keon Coleman, had a couple other nice passes to other receivers per reports, but he did have a couple of interceptions today. I believe one was batted at the line, popped up into the air, and this is the time of year where you really want to try things. And there were reports coming out that Allen is really forcing it into tight coverage today, and I think that's something to work on at this point of the preseason and training camp. So many new wide receivers at Josh Allen's disposal this year. He's got to get that chemistry with an Elijah Moore, a Joshua Palmer, and several others. And it really takes maybe not forcing the ball over and over and over, but testing things out, seeing what you can get, seeing the amount of juice you can squeeze out of the orange with these guys. And I think this is a perfect time to do it. I said for Josh Allen and Elijah Moore's connection, this was going to be a key week with that joint practice. having Josh Allen be out there extensively, working with that first team. And it seems like that connection has bore some fruit today, as I believe it was Josh Reed tweeting that Elijah Moore at least 3 receptions in the early going. And Sean, I understand what you're saying. You just don't like forcing it. But I think Josh Allen is at a point in his career where he can kind of tailor his practices to what he feels he needs in terms of his development and progression at that time of season. So I think this early in the year, I think this is a concerted effort for Allen to kind of test things out, test the waters, and see which receivers are going to go up and fight for the ball for me. Who's going to try to not allow the ball to be intercepted. So there's things to be worked out, and I think that's probably what you're seeing from Allen this early in the season. But yeah, a few receptions for Elijah Moore today, a lot near the line of scrimmage, and I think that's what you're going to see from the first-year Bills wide receiver this season. You're going to see those timing routes with Allen, 5 yards or so, and catch and go, get those yards after catch, or those third and shorts, get that short yardage to move the chains. So it seems like Elijah Moore is catching on right at the right time. Still no word whether or not the starters or Josh Allen will play on Sunday against the Bears in that preseason game. But during this joint practice, Elijah Moore and Josh Allen getting some good work in. And one of the interceptions from Josh Allen, ironically enough, came by way of Tremaine Edmonds, former Bills linebacker. I believe it was of the diving variety, and he finally made a splash play. Bills Mafia had been waiting for Tremaine Edmonds for years to make a splash play. Finally makes one. It's against the Bills. So good stuff from Tremaine Edmonds, and nothing to be concerned about in terms of Josh Allen. If you've seen that he's thrown a couple of interceptions today, don't get all hot and bothered about it. It's that time of year to kind of work out the kinks and refine your ability to connect with your receivers. And that's likely what Josh Allen is doing today at the joint practice. A few injury updates from the joint practice in Chicago between the Bills and the Bears. Dion Dawkins was back at practice after missing Wednesday's session with a back injury. He had missed a portion of Tuesday's practice, missed the entirety of Wednesday's practice with that back injury. But Sean McDermott the other day said that the hope was that he would return to the field on Friday, and that has indeed turned out to be the case. You saw Dawkins struggle a bit with Abdul Carter in that first preseason game. You wonder if all that bending and jostling around trying to corral the Giants' prized first-round pick, you wonder if that kind of lingered into the week of practice. But either way, Dion Dawkins back on the practice field, so no concern there. That's very, very good news for the Bills' offensive line. I said it on the last episode that not good news to have both of your starting tackles dealing with back injuries in the early going, but Spencer Brown is now back after missing the beginning of training camp, and Dion Dawkins bounced back pretty quickly. So good news there. To Corey Couch, the Bills, I believe, second-year cornerback, undrafted out of Miami, left the practice field. Walked unassisted, a little bit of a limp into the locker room after he went down covering a punt, that per the Buffalo News. So Couch, who has been having himself a strong training camp. It started in the offseason program, voluntary workouts, then mandatory minicamp, and he spread it into training camp. But a tough injury, it appears, to Corey Couch. We'll have to monitor the significance of that for the Bills' young defensive backs. Several players did not participate during Friday's joint practice for the Bills. That includes Khalil Shakir, Tylon Grable, Cedric Van Pran Granger, Max Hairston, and Cam Lewis. It's been determined it's a calf injury for Cam Lewis, who has that versatility at nickel cornerback and safety. We saw him start at safety in the Bills' first preseason game alongside Damar Hamlin. So that's a valuable piece for the Bills. Also on special teams, he kind of goes undervalued throughout the fan base, but the Bills really, really like Cam Lewis, so that'll be something to watch, his calf injury, as the week goes on into this weekend's game against the Chicago Bears, the exhibition game, that is. Cedric Van Pran Granger has missed, I believe, all of training camp with that calf injury, just remains on the PUP list. So he seemed to be someone that people really had high hopes for in terms of rapid progression after his selection in last year's draft. And he seemed to come along nicely in his rookie season, but now in his second year, he hasn't been able to get on the field due to some injury trouble. And also missing practice today. Yeah, Sean, I agree with you. I think SVP will perhaps at least be an IR with designation to return, but could be a full season IR. You wonder with the calf if it's something that's calf Achilles related. You're really not sure, but that base for an offensive lineman is so important. So to send him out there with an ailing calf, I don't think would be wise. Max Hairston continues to move around pretty well. I've seen a few videos with him in the background, remains in good spirits. He's obviously off the crutches, as we said a few days ago. I'm not sure if he'll be back by week 1, but I think there was some concern for that short-term IR. I'm not so sure about that now. I think the reports that have been coming out about Max Hairston and what it seems, reading the tea leaves, I believe he'll start the season on that 53-man roster and be right around the corner to participation once the regular season begins. I believe I heard Sean McDermott say that offensive lineman Tylan Grable remains in that concussion protocol. He was the Bills' swing tackle a season ago, and I expected him to be the same this year with Ryan Vandermark kind of falling behind in that race. But with Grable missing time, still in the concussion protocol, as I'm 90% sure I heard on the recording from Sean McDermott today, that seems to set him back and probably gives Vandermark a little bit of an edge in that race to lock down the swing tackle role. You've seen him perform at both spots, left tackle and right tackle. That is Ryan Vandermark over the past few years. So has that versatility. I think they like him a little bit better at left tackle, if my memory serves me correctly. But Tylan Grable still out with that concussion. Khalil Shakir continues to work his way back from that high ankle sprain he sustained during the Bills' return of the blue and red scrimmage. He remains on track to return week 1. And all I can say about Khalil Shakir, I can only imagine what it's going to look like when Shakir comes back. And, Marianne, you're very welcome for the update. And hopefully Ryan is doing well and the whole family as well. So you're very welcome, Marianne. Thanks for tuning in as always. But where was I? Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman's not connection, but the two being on the field together, I think that could be very, very dangerous for the Bills this year. Two dynamic skill sets, varying skill sets, and varying sized players as well of differing stature. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, with Keon Coleman's added ability to gain some separation down the field and draw extra defenders with him, I think that's only going to open things up a little bit more for Khalil Shakir to catch and run, as we saw him nearly perfect a season ago. So I'm really excited to see what Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman have to offer when on the field together this season, and just really intrigued to see how the Bills utilize their entire wide receiver group, how often we see that 13 personnel, how often we see that 11 personnel. So it's going to be an interesting waiting game to see what Joe Brady elects to do with this new look group. But two mainstays within this group, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, very, very excited to see what those two have to offer together this season. Good news coming from the practice field. I know I just mentioned all the players who missed today's practice, but there were a few that continued to either increase their participation or begin their participation at today's practice, namely Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp, both of whom appear in line to start in this weekend's preseason game. And you heard Sean McDermott talk about it earlier this week and how critical it is for those two to get on the field alongside one another and to develop that rapport and chemistry that is much needed at the back of the Bills secondary. And they got those much needed reps today during the joint practice. It was their second straight practice together, both of whom participating in team drills. So that points to a great sign for this weekend's game coming up against the Chicago Bears in Chicago, the Bills' second preseason game. And that should give this group at least a fighting chance to gain that chemistry they need to start out the season as the team's starting safety tandem, because judging based on Sean McDermott's comments last week, it seemed to open the door for a Damar Hamlin to get the start week 1 if they weren't convinced that Cole Bishop had done enough in that role. But being back now and having 2 more preseason games remaining, that's certainly a good sign for Cole Bishop's quest to come back and fit right in alongside Taylor Rapp on the back end of the Bills defense. Also, kicker Tyler Bass ramping things up, and he doesn't seem like he's going to participate in this weekend's game. He's been out for quite a while with that pelvic area soreness. The Bills taking things one step at a time, and Sean McDermott not intending the pun there, but he said that they've gone from stationary kicking to one-step kicking, and I think they're trying to progress along that line, trying to avoid a setback, McDermott said, and the hope is that Bass will return to kick during the team's 3rd preseason game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So don't expect to see Tyler Bass this weekend. Expect to see more Caden Davis, maybe a little Ray Davis at kicker for the Bills, but Bills just trying to avoid that setback with Tyler Bass, and it looks like they're going to move forward with Caden Davis this weekend against the Chicago Bears. Curtis Samuel, the much maligned wide receiver who much of Bills Mafia would like to see jettisoned to a different team, also returned to the practice field. He appeared to only participate in individual drills. Not sure about team drills, but it seemed like Curtis Samuel was out there I know he was out there during individual drills per Sal Capaccio's report. So good to see for Curtis Samuel. And Sean McDermott, maybe not critical of Samuel, but has kind of held his feet to the fire a little bit, saying that this is the time we need these guys on the field. And Samuel getting out there through that hamstring injury that's kept him out for the past couple of weeks here. Good sign for him. Maybe we get to see him this weekend against the Chicago Bears. But at the same time, I think at this point, I might doubt that. Maybe we see somewhat a small snap share for Samuel in that 3rd preseason game, or maybe we just don't see him at all during the preseason, and they take their chances going into the regular season, knowing he has already been around this team for a year, a veteran player. You've heard Joe Brady say that he really needs to see more from these newer guys than a player like Curtis Samuel. So I'm not sure the priority of getting Curtis Samuel preseason reps, but that remains to be seen this weekend against the Chicago Bears. A few other players that were limited. Alec Anderson with that knee that he had scoped a few weeks ago. He returned a couple of days ago and still limited. Shaq Thompson, I believe it's a hamstring. He's back from that injury, limited. The linebacker, the veteran offseason addition. And then another offseason addition, Larry Ogunjobi, I believe it's a foot. He was also limited during today's joint practice. And I'm really high on Michael Hoyt. You kind of pair Hoyt and Ogunjobi together because of how they were acquired this offseason and their 6-game suspensions and whatnot. But I truly believe that Hoyt is going to have a very good chance of contributing quite often within this Bills defense, whereas Ogunjobi, I'm just not so sure how much you're going to see from him even when he comes back. I think that defensive tackle room may be loaded now with those 2 rookies, TJ Sanders and Deion Walker. You have Daquan Jones. You have Ed Oliver. So I could see a situation where Ogunjobi comes back in his 5th or perhaps 6th in the pecking order in terms of defensive tackle snaps. So I think there was some excitement around that signing when it happened. Quickly, cold water got poured on it due to his 6-game suspension for PEDs. And I'm just not so sure he's ever going to be able to catch on within this defense enough to warrant a high snap share, even upon his return after that 6-game absence. But we'll move back to some practice updates from the field before we do that, we got Todd coming in here. Ogunjobi has no position. Pitt cut him because he was a declining player who struggled versus the run. He will most likely be cut after his suspension. I wouldn't put it past the Bills to do that, Todd. Like I said, I don't think Ogunjobi is really due for any meaningful role on the Bills roster this season. But back to the practice updates from the practice field. Per various beat reporters on hand for the practice today, Matt Milano continues to surge. He has had a phenomenal offseason training camp and start to the preseason. And today, per several reports, had a diving pass breakup early during team drills and just continues to show that quick fire ability, that recognition, and ability to close down and make plays. This could be an all-pro season for Matt Milano. First team, second team, whatever. He looks that good early on. And despite the injuries that he sustained the last 2 years, he's always been that level of player throughout this Bill or within this Bills defense for the past two or so years of production. So I think this could be a huge year for Matt Milano, a big bounce back year from those injuries. I think we could see him bring it all the way up to all-pro status this season. Fans have been waiting with bated breath to hear Elijah Moore's name mentioned this offseason. He really didn't do much during training camp, dealt with some lower leg soreness, and that didn't allow him to really gain any ground in terms of his connection that seemed to have been building with Josh Allen during mandatory minicamp and the offseason program. So Elijah Moore, I believe he was out in practice the other day, returns to the practice field today. 3 catches for Moore, as I mentioned earlier, and really starting, it seems, to get back into the groove with Josh Allen as we saw from him throughout this offseason. And I said it before, this was going to be a big week, and it turns out it's looking like it's going to be a big week for Elijah Moore's prospects in terms of his quest to lock down a contributing role within this team. And elsewhere on the practice field, TJ Sanders and Ed Oliver lining up alongside one another today. And that was something that Eric Turner of Cover One and I discussed this past week. Expect to see those two on the field in pass rushing scenarios, typically on third down, kind of a NASCAR defensive tackle package there with Ed Oliver and TJ Sanders, 2-3 techniques at heart, but players that are tough enough and use their leverage enough to perhaps be out there together in those pass rushing scenarios. And you saw it today. Reports saying that those two, I believe it was Lance Lysowski of the Buffalo News, saying that those two lining up alongside one another was bearing some fruit for the Bills. And another player along the defensive line, I think that has kind of gone under the radar this offseason, and maybe it's just because he's been around for so long, and after he signed his contract extension, you just kind of come to expect what he delivers each season. But that's Greg Rousseau. He also was drawing some praise from Lance Lysowski today. He has kind of become the forgotten man on this D-line, but with all the new additions, I think the steadiness of Rousseau on the edge could be such a solid bedrock for this unit. And on the other side, you saw a report from Steve Palazzolo who said he saw at least 2 would-be Joey Bosa sacks today against the Bears. And we all know the Bears' struggles to protect Caleb Williams last year, so maybe take those with a grain of salt. But it's good to see Joey Bosa continuing to make an impact. We saw during his, I believe, 12 snaps or so in the preseason game, really came on strong, and he's been an impact player for this Bills defensive line throughout the offseason and training camp. During the practice, the special teams period reportedly got ugly as several reporters rushed to their phones to report upon a scrum that occurred. I believe Dorian Williams was one of the ones involved in that scrum. A couple of dust-ups during this practice, and that's to be expected when two teams are battling it out against each other in a practice setting in the heat during the afternoon in front of the fans. Emotions start to run a little bit hot. So I think that's what you saw with a couple of dust-ups today, but nothing that lingered, nothing that was prolonged. So nothing really to worry about in terms of those scraps on the practice field today. And just a few more things before we close this one out. Jamarcus Ingram, I thought, per Sal Capaccio's reports, had an up and down day, and he's had a tough training camp when it comes to his defensive capabilities. He's been beaten quite a bit by Bills pass catchers, but Kevin Massare made made a very good point on X that he has been one of the Bills core special teams players. So I think that's his best route to make the roster. And judging based on Sal Capaccio's reports today, he really had a nice rep, locked up a gunner, drew a strong sense of praise from the Bills sideline. So that rings true to what Kevin said on Twitter earlier. Ingram being such an important piece on special teams last year, maybe that allows him to stick around, because I tweeted, I'm not so sure if he'll make the team, but considering the special teams ability, maybe I would walk that back a little bit. But as I said before, the preseason game coming up on Sunday between the Bills and the Bears, I bet, as I said before, Sean McDermott hasn't released whether or not the starters or Josh Allen will play, but I bet it depended a little bit on today's practice and the impression it left on McDermott. We've seen him kind of take that stance in past seasons where if they have a good practice leading into the second preseason game, he won't run the starters out there or change it up a little bit. And it also comes down to what Josh Allen feels he needs. He said, Sean McDermott did during his pre-practice press conference today, that Allen also takes a little bit of ownership over whether or not he plays in the preseason. So that's kind of a joint decision there. What Allen feels he needs, what McDermott feels the team needs. So I bet we'll hear that revealed over the next several hours or the next couple of days. But that's about it from the practice field. I did not see much more in terms of reports. If I'm forgetting anything, please follow. Sal does a great job. I think I mentioned Lance, Josh Reed, couple of different people today tweeting out updates from the joint practice. But I'd like to leave you with this, a message to Bills Mafia. I've been open and honest with my personal struggles in the past. And as is the case in football, development, progression, working yourself out of a dark place in life, very, very seldom a linear process. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't always handle things the way that I should, and perhaps treat people a little bit more aggressively than I intend to. And to those who have supported me throughout my journey, continue to support me throughout my journey, I sincerely apologize when those circumstances come up, because the last thing I want is for someone who has been supportive of me to feel embarrassed or betrayed by some of my over-aggressiveness at times in response to some of the people that don't have nice things to say on social media. And over the years, like I said, I've kind of had my ups and downs with that, and being more of an independent journalist now, I kind of, and probably unrightfully so, feel more freedom to kind of express myself in that regard. And like I said, it's something that I work on every single day. And I'm an immensely flawed human being. And like I said, I have never hidden from that in the past. I've actually been out front and honest about it. And I could use support at all times, just like anybody can. And like I said, when I disappoint or embarrass those people who have supported me in the past, that is where it becomes disappointing to me. And like I said, I sincerely apologize to all of those who have had my back over the years. I continue to strive to become a better person every day, and not only for myself, but also to confirm your support and not to make it feel wasted on your end. But at the same time, to all of you who continue to taunt, pile on, and deride me in my comments each and every day over my personal life, personal struggles, and things you really know nothing about, I have no apology for you. Absolutely none. You, much like myself, have shown your true colors over the past several weeks, and we all like to act like Bills Mafia is this divine fan base that was sent from the football gods, and we do no wrong. The lovable losers, as they've always been. We donate money to all these causes. In actuality, it's just like every other fan base in the world, immensely flawed. There's great people and there's horrible people. And while I have no excuse for my past actions, and as I said, I sincerely apologize to those who have supported me. I want to make that clear. To those who have supported me and continue to support me, I sincerely apologize for making your support seem empty. So for that, I sincerely apologize. But I suggest to all of you who have taken it upon yourselves to bully me in my mentions over the past days and weeks, take a look inside and examine yourself and realize that you indeed are not perfect either. While I may be immensely flawed, you are just along those same lines. And as James Cook said, you don't know the details of what I'm going through. So in the end, your opinion really doesn't mean shit. Having a great